Hey, what's up, comrades? On to Fairy Tale Volume 2, which starts off with Chapter 7. So here we are, Chapter 7. We're finally getting to the town. We have like a little recall of what's happening. Essentially, the plan Lucy has is she's going to be a maid. She's going to sneak in there. She's going to use her sexual charms, which she's very confident about her sex appeal, according to what she says. And they says, because you guys aren't doing shit, we're going to split it 80-10-10. And then Happy's like, you're only going to take 10%? That's so nice of you. And she's like, what? No! And then Natsu's like, hey, we're going to split this evenly because we're going to help rescue you. And she's like, I don't need help rescuing, blah, blah, blah. They get there. They eat. She wanders around a bit, and then she shows up while Natsu and Happy are eating in a sexy maid costume. And she's like, what do you think? And then Natsu and Happy are like, oh, shit, she believed our maid story. We weren't actually going to do that. She's like, fuck, I can hear you guys, you assholes. So then they go to the guy's house who's paying for the guild, the Duke Everloo. And he seems like a nice enough guy. He's there with his wife, and they're chit-chatting about that, and they're chit-chatting about, oh, I just want you guys to go destroy this book. I don't want it back. And Natsu's like, oh, I'll just burn the whole house down. That's why they call me Natsu the Salamander. And yada, yada, yada. And then he's like, all right, so the book I need burned is called Daybreak. And you destroy it completely. I don't want it. And she's like, what? And then he's like, oh, you guys still think I'm paying 200,000 jewels for it? It's 2 million. And they're like, wah! And then Natsu's like, yes, let's go burn this thing down. And then Lucy's like, hold up, wait a minute. I got a question. 2 million jewels is a lot to destroy a book. You don't want it back or anything? And he's like, no, just destroy it. And then Natsu's like, I'm all fired up, let's go. And she's like, no, I have questions. And they run out. After they're gone, the wife is like, are you sure you wanted to send those kids out there and not tell them about the previous wizards you sent out there? And he's like, no, the book is the one thing that I must erase from this world. So at the oh no, that wasn't Duke Everloo. That was Duke. Who was that? Cabby? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so Duke Everloo's the guy they're stealing it from. I apologize. Melon, that's right. Duke Melon. So Duke Cabby Melon. So they go to Duke Everloo's place, and then Lucy gets out there and looks sexy in her uniform and is like, hey, big guy, I'm a blonde maid, ready to go. And then this giant, like, beastly maid, like, pops out of the ground, and she's like, you want to be a maid? And then Duke Everloo pops out, too, in all his creepiness, and is like, ooh. And Lucy's like, oh, my gosh, it's a monster. And the Duke's, like, looking at her, and she's looking sexy and pretty and pushing her boobs forward and everything. And the Duke's like, ugh, ugly, get her out of here. And so then the big maid, like, tosses her, and then they all leave, and we see like his cadre, or the cadre of like ugly maids, like super ugly maids, is all over here. And so Lucy's having like a crisis of faith in her own sexiness. And they're like, all right, let's do Plan C. And then we go inside Duke Everloo, and you can see these two shadowy characters who are not his maids. And he's like, we will kill these wizards just like we killed the last. Takes us to Chapter 6. Happy is flying Natsu and Lucy into the roof, and Lucy's like, we're going to be sneaky about this. I want to see what this book is. We're not going to burn this place down. We're not going to break the law. And they break the law because Natsu uses his fire powers to melt the glass so they can sneak on in, and they find a bunch of artifacts and random stuff, including this like magic orb looking thing, which is important for later. Anyway, they sneak around. Eventually the maids pop up, and they're like, whoa! And then Natsu does like a fire ninja attack, because they're talking about being ninjas, being sneaky, and he knocks all of them off the balcony, and then they run into this room, and the room just happens to be the library. And so like, whew! I'm like, oh, there's so many books. And so Lucy clearly demonstrates her love for books as she starts looking through all the books and being like, wow, he's really good at this. Is a lot of books. This is very good, very good, very good. Wow, we're never going to find this thing. It's too much. And then Natsu's like, what about this golden book right here that says Daybreak on it? And they're like, ooh, we found it. Nice. And so Lucy takes it, or Natsu's about to burn it, and Lucy's like, hold on, give that to me. And he's like, the author is Kemu Xyleon. I love that guy. He has great books. This is an unpublished book by this guy. Wow, I'm the biggest fan. This is awesome. We're not going to burn this book. We're keeping it. We're going to lie, say we burnt it, and I'm keeping it. And Natsu's like, no, I refuse to lie. Absolutely not. And then the guy pops out of the ground, Duke Everloo, and is like, I see, that's what you were after. Why would you want such a worthless book? I don't care about that at all. And then Lucy's like, oh, okay, then I'm going to take it. He's like, no, what's mine is mine. You can't take it. And then Natsu and Everloo are like arguing, and then Natsu's like, let's go. Let's burn this thing down. And then Lucy's like reading the book. She's like, hold on, let me read it real quick. And he's like, what? And then Duke Everloo's like, I summon, come out, vanished brothers. And the bookcases move, and they literally say door, window, unveiling. Or hidden door unveiling, and the two shadow guys come forward, and they're the Vanished brothers from the Southern Wolf Bodyguard Guild, And they're like, oh, these kids we're supposed to kill. And Natsu's like looking shonen at him and is like, we're going to get this. And they looking at each other. And then they all turn around and scream at Lucy, who's just like got giant eyes and is reading very happily. And then the Vanished brothers are like, you guys are pathetic. And then Everlu's like, I want that book back. And then Lucy's like, oh, I got to read this. Natsu, I'll be back. There's a secret behind this book. And she like runs out the door. And the book Everlu's like, a secret? I want to know what this secret is. And so he dives into the ground and disappears, which leaves Natsu facing the Vanished brothers. And then Natsu's like, hey, I got this, motherfucker. These motherfuckers. I got them alone. Happy, go make sure Lucy's okay. And then Happy's like, you sure? And he's like, yeah, whatever. And then the one of the brothers is like, come on, fire wizards. And Natsu's like, hey, you know I'm a fire wizard. How'd you know that? And then we go back to that magic crystal ball that I mentioned earlier that they were watching the whole time. They watched everything. They knew that she's a sister wizard. The Happy can fly, yada, yada, yada. And then Natsu's like, all right, let's do this. And he lights his hand on fire. And then the one brother, he has got a giant frying pan. He's like, I am an expert at handling fire wizards. And this leads us into chapter 7. And, we get shonen talk. They're like bad-mouthing each other, talk. And then the wizards start fighting Natsu, and they're just like punching and kicking, and Natsu's diving around and dodging. And eventually they throw him out the door, and he goes flying out the wall and lands. And then the brothers come out, and they're like, we know every wizard's weakness. And Natsu's like, motion sickness? And they're like, what? No. It's like the wizards spend so much time practicing magic and their minds and all that crap that they ignore their bodies. And so if we just have strong bodies, we'll be able to beat any wizard. And they tell this crazy story about this guy who had this curse that can break all the bones in your body, and that when they faced him, he was going to cast it on him, but then the one brother was so fast that he broke every bone in that guy's body with his fist before he could cast the curse. And he's like, don't you see? And then they dance around a little more, and then Natsu's like, oh, you guys didn't realize you haven't touched me one time. Except when they threw him, I guess. And they're like, that's a good point. You must have trained very hard. All right, combined attack. And so they do this vanish attack thing, which they call Tenchi Shometsu Sappo, which means heaven and earth elimination death technique. And so the one brother hops in the pan and it gets tossed in the air. And while Natsu's looking at him, the brother with the frying pan runs at him and hits him. And then while Natsu's looking at the guy who hit him with the frying pan, the brother from the sky pounds him into the ground. And they're like, welcome, you have been presented the combined attack of the Vanished brothers. Oh, and one of the Vanished brothers keeps referencing their mama. And they're like, and you are dead. That is it. And then right as they're about to say that, Natsu pops up and he's like, none of your enemies who felt it has ever what? And they're like, oh my gosh, that's impossible. How is he alive? And he's like, whatever, I'm ready for this. And so he does a super fire dragon roar. And then the brothers are very confident because one of them's like, aha, flame cooking. That is my anti-fire wizard specialty ultimate attack. It doubles the fire magic and sends it right back. And so he sends it right back at Natsu, and that's a bad decision if we remember Natsu, who eats fire. And so like, haha, I got that motherfucker down. And they're like, farewell. And then Natsu comes charging at him, and they're like, the fuck? And then Natsu's like, didn't you hear me, motherfuckers? You're getting blown away. And then he casts his fire dragon's wing attack. And just like blasts these motherfuckers with his like fiery arms and just like pounds them into the ground. And they're like, what is this? The fairy tale wizards are very strong. And Natsu's like, all right, good stuff. Time to go find Lucy. And then the big maid from earlier who got knocked out, she like wakes up. Meanwhile, Lucy's reading Daybreak, and she's got these magic called the Gale Force reading glasses, which let her read really, really, really fast. And then she finishes it, and she's like, I don't think we can burn this book. And wow, I never imagined such a secret buried in here. He's like, we have to bring it back to Duke Melon. He's got to see this. And then through the wall, we hear, yo, I see you brought your Gale Force reading glasses. You're a very avid reader. And then she gets grabbed by the Duke from behind. And he pulls her against the wall. And then she's like, you're the lowest of the low, the enemy of all literature. Lucy's pretty hamstrung by the Duke. Held against the wall, her keys on the ground. What is she going to do? That's right, Happy's going to come. Happy comes and smashes the guy and then does like this crazy dive into the sewer. Lucy's all excited about the situation, grabs her keys, and her and the Duke have this conversation about her being a celestial wizard, and he says some kind of sketchy stuff. Anyway, they're talking about that, and then he uses his like dive magic, which is where he like dives in the ground and then comes back out. He keeps doing that. Lucy keeps dodging and avoiding, and eventually, and they're talking about the book. They're talking about where the book come from, how it happened, that he is actually the main character of the book, and that he kidnapped. He asked the writer, the famous writer, to write the book starring him as the hero, and the guy said no. So then he essentially said, hey, if you don't, I'm going to make it so your family members can't, revoke the rights of citizenship from every family member. And since just Duke is a Duke, and it's a feudal land, that means they can't join a guild, they can't trade, they can't work, they can't do anything. And so it's like a super big deal. And Happy's like, what? That's crazy. And Lucy talks about that it's a feudal society. Then, after he agreed to do it to save his family, the Duke imprisoned the author for 3 years and had him just write. And Lucy keeps talking about, you're missing the whole point of the book. You don't understand anything about it. And that the words aren't that simple, that he was a mage and that he used magical powers in here. And the Duke keeps thinking it's like a treasure chest or something like that. And finally, Lucy summons Cancer. And immediately Cancer calls her Ebby, which is shrimp, and asks if she wants a haircut because he fights with scissors and stuff. She's like, no, fight that guy. And then and then she mentions like the secret and stuff. And so then the Duke starts thinking like, okay, there's not a treasure chest. Maybe it's about all my dirty dealings and the bad things that I do. So then he summons his own celestial creature because he's also a celestial wizard. What, bro? And we find out that the big maid from earlier that Natsu beat the shit out of is Virgo. The celestial, the celestial being. And then Lucy's like, no! And then who came along with her through the spirit realm? It's Natsu. Natsu, as soon as he saw her starting to move, he grabbed a hold of her and traveled through the spirit world back to here. And people are like, that's not even possible. How did that happen? And Natsu's like, Lucy, what should I do? And he's like, take care of her. And so he does a super dragon punch and just knocks her the fuck out. And then as the Duke's about to go, Lucy pulls like a real badass move. She uses her whip that she's been carrying with her. Yeah, so she's a whip girl, which is another reason why Lucy is one of the best. And she uses her whip to grab the guy, swing him up, and then Cancer beats the shit out of him and knocks him right onto the maid, who's the celestial being, and also cuts off all his hair. and then she gets told that she did a great job by Happy and Natsu and Cancer. We get kind of like a retake. We get to see them talking about how, so Lucy's essentially explaining to Natsu what's going on with the book and how they need to go back and give it to the other guy, Melon. And we see images of all the beat up, mages and everything. And they walk in there and Lucy's like, here's your book. And the guy's like, I didn't pay you to bring it back to me. I paid you to burn it. And she's like, I don't think you should burn it. There's something you don't know about this. And then she says that the author is his father. So it's his papa. And then Natsu's like, why would you burn a book? Blah, 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 blah. And then Lucy's like, you do whatever you want. And then this guy talks about the shame on his family and tells this sad story. And he says from his point of view, his dad disappeared for 3 years and showed back up and was like super distraught. And then he tied off his arm and cut it off. And then he woke up in the hospital and he was smiley. And he's like, oh, son, you've grown up so much. And he's like, I haven't heard from you in 3 years. And this is all you say? You wrote some worthless book and for money? And the dad's like, yeah, that's what I did. And then the son like screams at him and storms off. And we find out that he later killed himself, committed suicide. And that the son, little cabbie boy, he's very regretful about what he did. And he says, I wish I'd treated my father better. Maybe he wouldn't have killed himself. And then he says, so I wanted to atone and destroy this awful book that is like the bane of his life's work. So he pulls out a match to light it. And then Lucy's like, wait! And then the magic comes from the book because his dad was a magic user. And then the words come off the page. And then instead of saying daybreak, it changes to Dear Cabby. And then she explains that not only that those words changed, but all the words on the inside did as well. And then we get this nice scene of like the book, like words flying around the room and Natsu and Happy being like, ooh, it's so pretty. and Lucy's like, the reason he gave up writing and cut off his arm was not because he wrote the worst book of his career. It's because he wrote his best book. Because he wrote a book to you, his son. Oh, that's so sweet. And he spent the whole time thinking of you, and he wrote this book. And then she hands him the book called Dear Cabby, and he starts crying while reading it. And then everyone's like happy and cheery, and then Natsu and Happy are like, all right, let's go. And he's like, what about your payment? And they're like, oh, we don't get paid. You paid us to destroy the book. The book's not paid. Destroy it, so then we can't accept payment. And Lucy's like, wait, no, I can accept payment. And Natsu's like, nope, that's not how we roll. You got to keep the honor for Fairy Tale. And then he's also like, hey, you guys should go home too. This isn't even your house. And so then Lucy's yelling at him as they walk back to Fairy Tale about the 2 million jewel reward. And then they have a little conversation. And she's like, how'd you even know that wasn't his house and all this stuff? And he's like, well, I could smell it. They smelled like one thing and the house smelled like something else. Didn't you notice? And she's like, no, I'm not an animal. And then they talk about how powerful of a wizard the author was because he wrote this book, and for 30 years it kept the magic so that they were able to use it. And then we get a shot of him with his wife living in like their small little shack in the woods, being happy, and he's laughing and enjoying and crying. And then she's like, maybe I'll follow in his footsteps and write a great book too. And then Natsu's like, I knew it. And she's like, what? And he's like, all those papers I found in your room. You're writing a novel too, aren't you? And she's like, please don't tell anyone. I'm not a good enough writer yet. I want to write better, and then I can print. And he's like, ha ha ha, don't worry, no one's going to read your book ever. And she's like, I'm happy that you agreed with me, but upset about what you said. And that's the end of that arc. So we're back at Fairy Tale indeterminate amount of time later, and we're just hanging out. Lucy's checking out all the quests. And then people are just talking about the missions and where's the master? Oh, the master went to where'd the master go? He went to the league, the scheduled league meeting. So the League of Guilds in the area. So then Lucy's like, what? I don't, like Nani Deska? I don't understand. So the Mary Jane borrows a pen, like a magic pen, and draws this thing where she's like, okay, so there's the government and the magic council's under them, and then the guilds are under the magic council, but the guilds all get together in their regions, and they have the regional league of guilds, so that they can discuss and help each other out, and there's a big network, so everyone kind of gets along and talks and all that stuff. And then while she's explaining this, Natsu sneaks up behind Lucy and is like, and then the black ones will come if the council falls apart. And she's like, yes! Like, don't scare me. And then Mary Jane's like, no, there's black guilds. They're the ones who refuse to abide by the council's leaders, and they kind of do whatever they want. And then Natsu's like, all right, Lucy, since we're a team, let's go find another quest to go on. And she's like, absolutely not. You just used me because I was blonde. And he's like, yeah, but there's plenty of blonde ladies here. We chose you because we like you, because you're nice. And she's like, And then Gray and Loki are like, hey, you don't need to determine what team you're going to be on right now. You can join us or do whatever. And Loki's like, hey, baby girl, join me. We'll make the love team. With all those like stars around his head and whatnot. And then Gray's like, yeah, you guys defeated 2 Southernwood Bodyguard guilds. You beat up that good big gorilla woman. Like, people are really impressed. You could be in like a whole bunch of different teams. And then Gray and Natsu start fighting because Gray's naked again. And then Loki's like flirting with her, and she's like, oh, like, because he's so charming and handsome. And then he sees that she has, that she's a celestial wizard, and she's like, oh, never mind, you're a celestial wizard, I'm out. And he runs away, and she's like, what? And Mary Jane's like, yeah, Loki isn't very good with celestial wizards. And she's like, God, that's so weird. And then Loki comes running back, and he's like, Natsu Gray, we have bad news, Urza's coming back. And then everyone in the guild's like, and then this sexy knight-looking wizard lady comes in with this giant like tusk or horn or whatever. And we get introduced to her as Urza Scarlet. And Lucy's like, huh? And so she sets this giant thing down. And it's like, smooth. And she's like, where's the master? And Mary Jane's like, oh, he's at the league. And she's like, I see. And someone's like, what is that enormous thing? And she's like, I defeated a beast. And then the people of the town like decorated it for me. And I decided to bring it back. You got a problem with that? And like, no. And then she's like, I hear you people have been causing nothing but trouble. Maybe the master will overlook it, but I won't. And then she starts chewing everybody out. She's like, Kana, you're drinking. You stop dancing. You stop making ash on the table. You choose a fucking quest and go on it and stop standing in front of the board. And then she's like, all right, well, I'm not going to say anything because I'm tired. And Lucy's like, she's been saying a whole lot. And then Lucy's like, Happy, who is that? And Happy's like, oh, that's Urza. And then she's like, by the way, where are Natsu and Gray? And we see them like hugging, covered in sweat, holding hands, like, oh, hey, we're best friends, Urza. We would never fight, do anything. And Lucy's like, what the fuck? And she's like, even friends can fight, but I love seeing you two like this. And then Mary Jane explains that Gray got beat up real bad by Urza because he was naked. Natsu challenged her to a fight and got beat up. Loki hit on her and then got beat up. And that she's super strong. And then she's like, back to Urza. She's like, all right, good. I need you two. We're going to make a team and go on a quest because I want you two to help me. And they're like, and everyone's like, and it's like, what? Those two? And then she's like, we're leaving tomorrow. And they're like, no, I never agreed to it, ever. And then Mary Jane's like, Urza, Natsu, and Gray. I never imagined such a thing happening. This could be the most powerful fairy tale team has ever seen. And then Urza walks off, and then Natsu and Gray argue a little bit more. And then Natsu's like, I got an idea. And he dresses up, see, like Natsu with like his scarf and his vest and her hair. And he's like, all right, you can go in my place. And she's like, this is not going to work. We end this chapter, chapter 10, with the Eisenwald Wizard Guild. And it's a bunch of sketchy looking dudes talking very sketchily. And there's this Kageyama guy that's mentioned. And then we kind of wrap up with seeing Aragorn, the death god. And he's planning some sketchy thing while everyone's in their council meetings. Lucy, of course, gets dragged along with the crew. And we're at Magnolia Station, and Natsu and Gray are already fighting. And Lucy recalls how Mary Jane's like, hey, you should go with them because they like to fight a lot. And so Lucy's like, hey, you guys need to stop it. She sent me down here to make sure you guys don't do this. And then they refuse to stop fighting. So then Lucy's like, "Oh, hey, Ursa, welcome back." And they are like, "Oh, hey, we're best friends. We love being best friends." And Lucy's like, "Ha ha ha, you guys are best friends." And then Ursa shows up, and she's got a like like a whole like truck's worth of luggage. And Lucy's like, "What the fuck?" And then at this point, she introduces herself to Ursa, and she's like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. Very, very good things about you." But what she's heard is like completely not accurate. Like instead of the like whatever lone wolf bodyguard guild, she calls it like the gorilla guild or something. At this point, Ursa lets them know that there's going to be a challenge they have to face, and the Natsu's like, "There's only one way I'm going to come with you, and that's after this you let me challenge you again." And she's like, "Yeah, that's fine. You've grown a lot. You might even beat me this time." And he's like, "What? I want you to do the best that you can." And she's like, "Of course I will. I just said you grew, you dumbass." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm on fire. I'm feeling this now." And then immediately we're on the train, and he's dying of sickness. At this point, Ursa looks over at him, and she's like, "Come here, come here." And he comes to sit next to her, and Lucy moves out of the way, and then she knocks him out with a punch. And it's like, there we go. We then learn that Gray is an ice magician, and that he makes beautiful ice sculptures, which he shows to Lucy at this point. And then Lucy is like, "Oh, I see. I know exactly why you guys don't get along, because you're an ice mage and he's a fire mage. Aha!" And then Ursa's like, "Yeah, that actually might be the reason why." And so then Lucy asks about like what the mission is, and Ursa responds that on her way back from like a previous mission, she stopped by this bar and she heard these guys chatting about how one of these guys was going to go break a seal and get the lullaby and all this like really shady stuff. And then she tells them that this group, the what guild is this from? This guild is a black guild. Eisenwald, the Eisenwald Guild, and they're led by the Death God, Aragorn. And then it took her a while to figure out, otherwise she would have killed everyone in the guild right then, because there's only 4 guys, and she could have taken them. But now it's like trying to fight the whole guild. She wanted Natsu and Gray's help. And that they were expelled 6 years ago because the Aragorn is an assassin class mage, and when they made assassination magic outlawed, he just kept doing it, so they kicked him out. And then they talk about what lullaby is, but none of them really kind of recognize what it is. And then at the end, Ursa's like, "We're going to march on Eisenwald and take him out." And when they get off the train, they realize that ruh-roh, Natsu's still on the train. So Natsu is on the train, like barely holding it together. And this creepy dude named Kageyama shows up. And he's the guy that was mentioned before as the guy who was going to break the seal and then bring lullaby to the rest of the guild. And he's like, "Oh, hello, fairy tale guild, I see." Which leads us to chapter 12. And Ursa and Lucy are both like really upset. And then Ursa's like real crazy. She just starts walking up to people and is like, "Stop the train. You know why?" And they're like, "I don't know why. I just met you. What's going on?" Happy sees an emergency stop signal, and he goes and blasts it. And then Ursa, Gray's naked now, and Lucy all kind of like head towards the train. Back on the train, Kageyama's just talking really creepily about the beautiful women in fairy tale and all this stuff. And again, Natsu's like barely holding it together. And then Kageyama kicks Natsu right in the face, and then Natsu stops him and from kicking him again, and then they like chit-chat and about the magic and what's going on. And we see that Kageyama has some sort of like shadow magic, and at that point the train stops. And because the train stops now, Natsu gets a look at this strange like skull flute looking thing with 3 eyes. And then he's like good to go because he's not sick. So he charges up his fire magic and hits the shit out of this guy. And he's like, "All right, you ready to do this?" Because the guy he says they call his guild the Fly Guild. And then at that point, Natsu's like ready to go. But then they announce that the emergency stop was an accident and that they're going to start the train again. And Natsu's like, "Ruh-roh, I'm going to get you later." And he jumps out of the train. And right as he's jumping out of the train, Ursa is driving like a horseless carriage with Gray on the top and Lucy inside, right? And so Gray and Natsu like bash heads together on top of the thing and both fall off the thing. And this is a magic 4-wheeler car that's faster than a horse-drawn carriage, but it uses your mana to go. And then they almost fight, and Ursa stops them, and Ursa and Lucy both ask forgiveness from Natsu for leaving him on the train. And at that point, Natsu explains that he was attacked by a weird guy named like Kaguya, or he mentions the guild. It was like Eisenwald. And then Ursa's like hits him in the face, like, "You fool!" And he's like, "What did you see?" And he's like, "I don't know, but they had this weird skull-shaped flute with 3 eyes." And Lucy's like, "Ruh-roh, I know what that is. I thought it was a myth, but lullaby is a sleep death. And when you play it, it's like a mass death spell that puts everyone to sleep, but like puts them to sleep for good." And they're like, ruh-roh. And Urza's like, we got to go right now. Because the guy's still on the station and they're headed that way. Meanwhile, at the next station, Aragorn, or whatever his name is, and his whole guild like show up and kick everybody off the train and take over the station. And Kageyama hands over the flute and he's like, ah, yes, the forbidden magic item, Lullaby, the mass murdering curse spell. Excellent. Let's get started. And Urza's like sweating and like, oh, we can't let them mass murder everybody. Meanwhile, back at the station, starting in chapter 13, they send in a patrol to kind of get the guild out of there. And Natsu and Gray and everyone's getting prepped to fight this guild. Inside, Kageyama gets his ear sliced off because he didn't beat Natsu. He fought him and then lost, and he gets, well, not as off. He gets like cuts on his ears, and everyone's like, ugh. And then the Aragorn is like the guild master or whatever. He's like, we're gonna get them. We're gonna get those sons of bitches. Natsu's throwing up at the back of the the like magic wagon as they roll into Oshibana Station, which is the station that these guys took out. Urza starts bashing people in the head and demanding to be let into the station to know what the situation is. Eventually, they find out that there is a guard patrol. Lucy's carrying Natsu because he's still recovering from his sickness. And then Urza's like talking about how there's no way this like regular humans could fight this whole guild of magic users. And when they roll up into the station, they see this guild, and it's a ton of guys. And Aragorn is like sitting up top, and they're like, ah, Fairy Tale, you've arrived. And Urza's like, ah, so Aragorn, blah, blah, blah. And then Lucy's in the back being like, wake up, Natsu, wake up. And Happy's like, you can't make that. He was on a train, then a four-wheeled car. He's out. He's out from the count. And then Natsu keeps being like, oh, that voice. What is that voice? And then Urza and Aragorn go back and forth. Aragorn like leaps up to the top, and they figure out that the reason why they came to the station to use this thing was because it has like a mass broadcast system, and that they're going to play the flute over the. They're going to broadcast the flute over like near the station, like the town, and kill like hundreds or thousands of people. And Urza's like, why? Why are you doing this? And he's like, it's a purge. And then at some point, Lucy's like, wait, you just want to do this so you can get work? And he's like, no, we want to rule. And then we can make our own things. And then Kageyama uses his shadow magic to get Lucy, who's standing in the back by Natsu. But at that point, Natsu like realizes what the voice is, and he wakes up, destroys the magic shadow arm that he was going to use. And then Lucy's like, he's back. And then Natsu's like, I'm ready. I'm fighting on solid ground. And then Aragorn makes some like weird noises. And Natsu's like, wait a second, there's a whole bunch of them. Who are all these guys? He's like, that's our enemy. And then Aragorn's like, aha, you fell for my trap, didn't you, Fairy Tale? I'd planned this from the very start. There are certain people who have to hear my tune. The people I must kill. So it seems like he was hired to assassinate Urza, at least, or members of the Fairy Tale Guild. But that wraps up Volume 2. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.